Hi, and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this tutorial we're going to be continuing with modelling this motor. So in the previous tutorials we modelled this this front side, the middle section of these bolts, and this rear part of these bolts. So you should be up to this point. If I just unhide these image planes, we can see what we're going to do. So in this tutorial we're going to just finish off the motor by preparing these cables to be, we're not going to model all the cables until we've sort of placed this out so we know where we can route these, but we can lay the first foundations of this, then we can sort of create the paths of these afterwards. So what we're going to do in this one is create this sort of shaft, this bearing, probably this rubber bit here as well, and it's probably about it. So I'm just going to go to my orthographic front. So this is actually the back, sorry, so let's go to my orthographic back. Cool. So we just move my, if I go shading and X-ray, I'm just going to some reason that's not working. Why is that? Orthographic back. Maybe it's because we've just got too much GA. Let's just pull them out of there. Like this. Let's just change our alpha gain to 0.7. Change our wireframe shaded on. Cool. So we can just roughly get this lined up. Obviously, it's not going to perfectly match because it's shot at a perspective angle, but we should be able to get it reasonably close. I'm just going to rotate this round so that matches that side. Doesn't look like our things in the center. Let's just make sure we center our pivot. And I'm just going to try and roughly get this lined up. And just something like that should be fine. So we can see we've got this sort of bearing shape in the middle. And what we can do, we actually, if we unhide our chainsword, just, you have to ignore the scale for now. X-ray off. Default material on. Everything's hard things. So if we just go here, we've actually made a bearing already. So we can, if we Control D to duplicate that, and we can pull that out. Press Shift P to remove it from the group. And then we can hide the chainsword. Let's go back to our orthographic, because if we can reuse stuff, we want to reuse stuff because it's going to save us time. So if you can do that, it's worthwhile doing. So I'm just going to group this, center it. I'm just going to scale this up, and hopefully it might not match, but it's worth a try. See, just turn our wireframe on, just hide the motor, and turn our show selection highlighting off. Cool. So let's try and scale it to a roughly correct size, and all I want to do, I just want to try and, because we've already modelled this once, so we don't have to remodel it again. It's basically the same thing, just it's not exactly the same. So go to our smooth shader, we can see that this outer bit is actually a little bit wider. So what I can do if I Control delete, I delete all those edges, and I can just select all these faces. If I just unhide my motor now. And we're not going to see a great deal of this anyway, so don't worry too much. But I'm just going to make it so we can cover up some bits. So we're going to hold Shift and right click and use Transform Component. I'm just going to scale that out a bit so it's covered there. Just pull this out. Just select my edges again. I can just re-bevel that. Yeah, we're not going to see it, so cool. So something like that. Now if I go back to my orthographic back, unhide that plane, we can see we've pretty much got our bearing in the correct place. So we've got this sort of clip here. Let's go to our back. So we can make this clip. Like I said, we're probably not really going to see it, but it's good practice in the modelling. So if I just hide my motor, and I'll just stick that under the motor as well. So we're probably not going to see much of this, but we can model it anyway, just for good practice. So I'm going to start off with a cylinder, as usual. And just double check our orientations, reset our tools. So I'm going to go to my orthographic back. I'm just going to rotate this round 90 degrees. I'm just going to turn my shaded X-ray on so I can see through. I'm just going to roughly line this up and scale it down to the inside of that hole. So we're going to duplicate it anyway, so don't worry too much. But we only have to do this one side, sorry. Cool. So I'm going to do 12 subdivisions, I think, because that should give us enough detail to get these corners in as well. So at the moment I'm just going to use this, and I'm just going to select all my faces and delete those. Double click on my edge and Control E. And as usual on every other ones, I just do my first sort of extrusion, which I hope I won't go into sort of adding any poles or nodes. Just going to go to my perspective. So my faces, I'm just going to delete all those faces. So I'm definitely working on a flat plane. So I've done that a couple times. Cool. So now I'm just going to select my edges again and extrude out. And do one more, then I'm going to extrude. And this is where I'm going to start thinking where am I going to put my sort of edges. So I'm going to go to my modeling toolkit. I'm just going to sort of see what I can do with the geometry I already have. So that's definitely looking quite disgusting, but what I can do is select all these vertices. Just rotate that round. So it's more fitting to the sort of size shape that I want. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this, because if I just press 3, I'm just going to get my rough shape. I'm not going to really see this that much. But I'm not sure about that, so let's delete that. And I want to start planning out this, so I'm just going to Control E on that and pull that out. So I want something like this. So you don't want a super high poly. I don't want this too high poly, although it's already seemingly going to be that way. And we're not going to see this a great deal, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. Just want to quickly finish this motor off so we can move on to something different. So we've got this pretty basic shape. So now, before I do anything else, let's try and tidy this up as much as I can. We've got that. We've got a pretty decent shape there. So I'm just going to go make another cylinder. I'm just going to use this as reference. For the sort of rotation of it. Scale these all in one direction, actually. going to try and line these up with there. So we just press Control E. And I'm just going to use this as my rotation reference. So I'm just focusing on this outside bit. Then we can do the sort of inner bit. We're doing a lot of things that we're definitely not really going to see, but so I'm just pressing Control E to extrude. Just do one more. Put there. And so I'm just going to select my polygons and sort of select all these all these vertices, sorry. Just these inner ones. Just going to scale them up a bit. I'm just going to bring these up uniformly around. I'm not going to see it, so if you plan on doing like a really big model breakdown, like some people like to do, where they strip the model apart and show all the bits, this is obviously going to look great when you do that. Cool. So if you just press 3, we can see we've got the shape that we want. So if we just Control D, and we can minus it in the Y, flip it. Where's the Z? Maybe. Yeah, we'll sort of roughly match that up. Cool. So I'm just going to select both of those, edit mesh, combine. In fact, I'm just going to freeze the transforms on that first, and freeze the transforms on that because we flipped it. And then I'm just going to mesh, combine. I don't need the cylinder anymore. Select my vertices. Then go edit mesh and merge to center. I'm just going to merge these to the center. Cool. So I press 3. We now have our sort of clip. So turn my shading X-ray off. Select all my faces. Just press Control E. Extrude that out. It's probably not very much, but select all our edges. And we can select bevel. Cool, so now we've got this like sort of clip thing. So we're going to hide our motor. Like that. So if we look at this reference, we can sort of see bearing sits on this sort of brassy bit. So that could quite easily just be a so we could just create a polygon primitives and just, we haven't made one of these yet, so we can just make a pipe. So you can just make a pipe if you want. I'm just going to rotate that down. Orthographic back. Unhide the image plane. So scale this up roughly to that sort of brass bit. Turn on my X-ray. And you can change your poly pipe in here. So you can change your thickness to like 0.2. 0.2 is pretty close. You can turn my X-ray off. And I'm just going to look at this and see what we've got here. So it's kind of sat on top of the bearing a little bit. Some of this we have to guesstimate. Try our best to sort of get something that looks realistic. Ooh, what's going on? So we have got some sort of beveling bits going on here. That's going into super detail that we're not really going to see. It's up to you whether if you want to do that. Let's do it. God, no, may as well. So it's just a very small, what it looks like is, if we add that edge loop in there, we can extrude out, then do another extrusion. So we're never going to really see this, I don't think. And I think it was slightly beveled out then. If I bevel that out, select those edges and scale that. Something like this. Sitting on top. So we don't really need to do much of this. We can, because this is all definitely going to be covered. So let's make another cylinder. Let's rotate that around next. Just going to go to my orthographic front. Orthographic back. Roughly place that. And I'm going to have to sort of do a lot of this by eye now. So I'm just going to get that first bit of metal in there. So I think that's fairly reasonable for that section. And it's covering quite a large piece of that, so don't forget to attribute that and add a subdivision cap. Just gonna let's get rid of all the caps actually, because it's just easier then. And let's reduce this so it's an easier mesh to sort of fix the end. So I'm just going to select this face, Control E, scale it in a bit. I'm just trying to match this here. Control E out. It's quite long. Maybe not that long. Yeah, I think just get some more wireframe. Just want to select this polygon now. Control E and do the same thing. Control E. Go to my smooth shade again. Control E, scale out. That probably meets at least in there somewhere. Control E. And you know what, if I pull that all the way back to the end. Let's have a look at our reference from our back and find it. That's our front. Cool. So it's just like just the end of the sort of motor. I don't think that spins or anything, but I'm not sure it's going to matter so much. But we can have a look at that. And it's just got a bevel on the end. And it's actually come through at the exact correct, pretty much the perfect size. Control E. Control E again. So I'm just going to use my multi-cut and fix this polygon at the end. Just want to make sure that we have quads. So first thing to do, I'm just going to actually just bevel this because it's the easiest thing to do straight away. It's obviously not aligned, but we can sort that out in a sec. So let's hide all these image planes. Let's hide that one. Cool. So these things aren't round, so we can actually make sure we put that in. That side, I'll flatten that. Let's flatten that side. Select both of those and just flatten that side. So I'll flatten that side. Scale this both in so it looks a bit more normal. Cool. We're not going to do the whole in there because it's not really much, not a huge point. Because it's just going to be covered. And a lot of this stuff's going to be covered. It's very unlikely, even like we're never going to see that clip. Like remember the shot that we're doing it for. This is just not gonna. You're never going to see it or notice it. But so I'm just going to go around and just do all these edges. But just because it's for a shot, it doesn't mean that we can't just try and make it as best as we can. So we need to actually keep these sharp first. So Control E and just do it. Extrude in them. Oh, 0.05. No. kept that sharp. Obviously this is all Control E it now. And if we press that, that keeps that sharpish. Control E. Yeah, let's just fix this before we go any further. Cool. Just got my sharp edge there. I'm not too worried about this because we're just not going to see it that much. So just going to bevel all these edges nice and sharp. To make sure like that tubes there. And some quick edge loops here just to stop that from. Cool. So now we've got those sharp edges around there. And this is all kind of working. We're not going to see it, so I'm not hugely worried about it. Cool. So what we're going to do now is probably do this section. We'll just rough out these wires and that sort of rubber sort of side. So I'm just going to go to my back. And then I'm just going to sort of plan out these wires. So I'm not too worried about these at the moment because I'm going to use a different technique to actually wire these out so we can direct them a little bit easier. But I can set them up so they're poking out now. Just in preparation for when we'll actually do that. So we've got 4 sort of cables. I don't think we won't need all of these cables because we're just going to turn the power on and off. So this is for like the control boards. What we can do is just rough it out for now. Oh, no. So they're probably coming in together. And I think that's probably a couple of smaller ones. We can be a bit creative because we're not going to use all these wires. Cool. So we've got some sort of rough wires. We can see they're all sort of twisted and stuff, but We're not going to do that yet. We're just going to sort of plan it out. Get the things working that we can see. Let's duplicate that. So we can, because I'm probably only going to use 2 of these wires, and the rest we can figure out a way to tuck them away. But I do want to make sure that I get this all nicely done first. So add a cut. I'm just going to get the first sort of twisting and stuff done. So I'm just going to add a couple equal. Cool. So I'm also going to make sure delete these. I'm just going to fill both holes. Because when I extrude this out, that'll probably be the sheath. We'll probably do some wiry bits on the inside, but for now, because I'm only doing this bit first, because then I can create a curve. And instead of modeling it all the way out, I can actually sort of block it out with my curve, get something that I want that looks nice. Then I can extrude along that curve and control it along that. Instead of extruding it along and yeah, just you don't want to be doing that, because if you don't like it, you have to sort of redo it. So just prepping my first cable, and I can just duplicate this afterwards. Cool. I'm just going to delete these, don't need those. In fact, there's no point doing that all again, so I'll just duplicate that. Smaller ones, because these are going to be like braided material on them, so cool. So the first thing I want to do is sort of get the first initial shape, because they're not going to bend that much outside of here, but if I can get a nice, because obviously they're coming out straight and it kind of looks a bit rubbish. So I'm just going to freeze all the transforms, delete the history, and go on to deform, and I'm going to go on lattice. I'm just going to use a lattice to sort of bend it round, instead of trying to do it with all the sort of geometry. I can use my lattice shape, and I only really want it in the S divisions. I think 4 should be right. I'm just going to select my lattice point. And I just use these points to sort of give it a more sort of bent out shape, so it's not such a rigid cable. Pull it out and give it a little bit of more life. Cool. So it's fairly simple. I'm not doing loads. I just want to sort of make it a little bit more less rigid, basically. So I'm just going to my lattice. Change that to 3. No, why is that different on that one? So 4. the same again. Right click and select my lattice point. And try and make sure they're not intersecting or anything, but cool. I'll just do the same for this as well. I don't want them all going the same way. I just want them slightly offset so they're not so perfect. Cool, just something like that. Just so it's not so plain. Let's actually get those done as well. So we're not going to see the inside there anyway, so let's just do the same. Let's do this one first, then lattice. Just not doing anything complicated, just trying to make it look a little bit less rigid. But you can do as much as you can go as far as you want with this. But I'm only doing it this far because I know I'm gonna actually route these cables a little bit better later. So I could actually have one crossing over. And you can add pinching to the cable and stuff like that, but for now I think this should be okay. Just gonna... Cool. So we've sort of got this rough shape. Maybe even they are all sort of pointing down, aren't they? So I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just going to select all those. Just select the geometry. And there you go. Freeze transformations, delete. Ooh. Delete all the history first and freeze the transformations and center the pivot. Something else happened here. select all the geometry, delete the history, then freeze the transformations. Cool. So just make sure we name our geometry. Just going to quickly name all this so I know it's I'm just going to group all those and just call those wires for now. I'm just going to select all of this and just freeze the transformations, delete the history and center them all so I get rid of all those shapes. So now on my sort of reference, where are I? We have this sort of rubbery bit. So we can model that around there now. We could probably shrink wrap that. It might be a bit overkill, it's pretty basic. So yeah, let's just wrap it, let's just model around it. So I'm actually just gonna start with a plane for once. Gonna hold V and snap it to possibly this part here. Change subdivisions, widths and height to 1. Just pull it out a bit. And I need to sort of model this so it's wrapped around, so I need to think about where it's going to be like sort of pulled in, stretched out and bent over. So at the moment I'm just going to block it out first before I do anything. So just Control E. I'm just going to roughly wrap this round for now, then we can make it a lot nicer afterwards. There are tons of ways we could do this. We could effectively, if we wanted to, we could just use end cloth and just do a shrink wrap, which is fine. I've done it. If you've used end cloth before, that's probably how I'd do it. But this is pretty quick and easy to do it this way. And like I say, we're probably not going to see it. It's just more for doing some modeling and just different techniques that you can use to create stuff. So 1, 2, 3. Just going to bridge that. Cool. Now we've just like pretty much got something really rough and nasty. I'm just going to tidy it all up. So these are going to be smooth, so I'm going to make sure that I actually wrap it to smooth. Obviously these are going to have tighter edges. And I'm just going to make my cuts where I want it to sink in and raise up and sink in. If we look at the reference, we can also see it's sort of wavy in parts, so we can get away with being quite rough with this. So I'm just going to work on my smooth. Number 2, sorry. I'm just going to use my number 2 mode so I can see where I'm pulling my actual mesh. Also see the effects of the smooth on it as well. All this we're not going to see. I know I say that a lot. It's good practice. Find. So we probably don't have to go too much detail into this. So select edges, just extrude that in. Yeah, probably scale up. Because I know we sort of see some rubbery bits here. Oh, I'm not going to see it. Pull this a bit straighter so now in the reference that kind of gets blocked up by the rubbery bit. But I'm actually going to hide that so I can see in there. Let's actually undo that. I'm going to hide this. I expect it probably, I know we're going into sort of way too much. We're not going to ever see it. So I'm just very roughly making some sort of logical bend in this. It doesn't matter because we're not gonna see it, but it should be fine. Cool, so we've got this sort of rubbery wrap thing now. And what we'll do is probably select it or Control E and give it some depth. So now we've got some thickness on it. But I'm just going to select these edges, give it a very loose bevel. Just a bit like that. Cool, I think that's probably good enough for what we need. And I think, because with these cables, once we've got this mounted on and sort of figured out where we're going to go, we're going to map it out with some curves. Then we're going to extrude along those curves so we don't end up wasting time modeling them. So we're just going to leave them short like that for now. And I think what we're going to do now is just finish up creating the sprocket. So I'm just gonna, let's tidy all this up before we go any further. So we'll just call this wire wrap geo. I'll just put this on our drive, raspberry. We've actually got a lot of stuff unnamed in here, so front geo, bonk. We can rename it. We'll just put those in a group for now. We'll just call these small screws GRP. What's this group here? Just call this bearing GP. And what's this? Call this motor. You can obviously call it whatever you want. It's just easier to sort of, as long as you make it sort of recognizable, so you know. We'll probably rename this layer. Let's put that all under the motor. Just have a little quick sort of tidy up. So I think it's in that group, and we can do some more of that later. So what we're going to do now is just build the sprocket. I'm just going to put everything. So I'm just going to go to my panels, orthographic front, and I don't need that for now. I can hide that. I'm just going to go select camera and import image. I'm just going to go to my reference. Sword ref, and I have to try and find it in here somewhere. So you should have this. I've updated the reference spec. So we're going to make something like this. Let's check if I've not got any other ones in there. Pretty sure I had some other ones. So we'll do that one in the next one. That's going to be the sort of bracket. So we can safely assume that it's probably all part of the same sort of kit. Where is it? So you can see we've still got quite a lot to model. Here we go. So I prefer something like this. Where was the other one? We can put the little hole in. We'll need the little hole and bolt. So we can figure that out as well. So we might actually get away with reusing some stuff. I don't know. No, we can't because it's a different size. So let's make this sort of sprocket part here. So I'm going to go with the one that I tried to find. So we've got loads of sprockets. So this was the one actually that I wanted to use. Excuse me. So we've got a much smaller sort of amount of spokes on this one. I guess it makes more sense because if it was larger, we would have more speed, but less torque. It doesn't really matter. You can have it as big as you want, but logically, with sort of chainsaw, you probably want more torque. So this will drive way more power to our chainsaw blade. It won't go as fast, but it means it will take a lot to stop it. Whereas you could have this really big and it goes super fast, but then it hits something and could end up just stopping. but it's imaginary at this point, so it doesn't matter so much. So we're just going to create this shape, and I'm not going to trace around it. I'm just going to use this as reference because it's a pretty symmetrical shape. So I'm going to start off with a cylinder. Just going to rotate that round. And I hope you guys have been enjoying this sort of modelling series. We'll try and get as much out of this as possible, just so you can start doing your own projects and stuff. So I'm just going to count these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 maybe. 1. So that probably goes around there. There's probably 2 behind there, right? It seems like there'd be 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is going to be our amount of spokes. And I'm just going to double that now. But I'm actually going to leave it on 10. I'm just going to select my faces. I'm not too bothered about the scale as of yet. We can scale this up. As long as we keep it uniformal, we can work in... Ideally, you want to work in real world scale straight away because it makes it easier. But if you don't know, it doesn't matter so much. Just make sure you scale it afterwards. And because we're working in sort of a symmetrical scale, it's not such a problem. So it's going to be the same way as we did these other sprockets. So I'm going to do most of this by eye. So what we could actually do is like, so I'm just going to select all these faces and deselect the center. Press Ctrl E, turn my keep faces off, and now you can see that I'm extruding these out. And it's quite hard to see how far this really goes out. So a lot of the time you're going to have to sort of train your eye from reference. You're not always going to be able to trace over something. So in reality, we probably could line this up through a camera, guess the focal length and sort of trace around it. But you still want to be able to train your eye in what we're actually seeing here. So I'm just going to extrude these out. Press R. I'm going to go to my scale tool. Double click on your scale tool here and change my scale settings to component. So now I can scale them all in that in their axis, well, in their sort of component sort of axis. So now they're all scaling together. So we're going to try and do this all without actually doing a duplicate special, so we should be able to do it. I realized a mistake. Oh, I'll be alright, we can just delete that and do that again. It's fine. Okay, so I'm just going to go to my faces, and I'm just going to delete these center ones now. Double click on this edge, and I'm just going to go to my perspective. I'm actually just going to scale this roughly to a reasonable sort of size. I think it's quite thick. We'll probably have to still, if we get this in a really good area, a really good state when we finish it, we're still probably going to scale it a little bit and change it when we do our chain, because we've not got to that part yet. So I'm just going to scale these edges in now. Cool. So now I'm just going to select these middle edges here. Probably could have just selected it all, but oh well. Then I'm going to deselect all these. So I just want to select these edges in here. So just holding control and deselecting it all. Cool, so you should only have those. Just go to my modeling toolkit, like select Bevel. And now you can see I've made some gaps in between them. So I'm going to add a segment. And I want to try and match this rounded. It's quite a large rounded edge. We can go with something like this. We're not going to see a load of this either, so a lot of this will be covered up with chain, but if we can get it as close as possible, it'll be a lot easier for us. So if we press 3, we can sort of see we're almost getting that shape already. It's just we've got a lot of sort of nastiness up here. So we can sort of see it sort of curves down a bit, whereas ours doesn't. So this is where I'm probably actually going to use duplicate special, because I want to make that curve, but because obviously I can't do the edge loops and I'd have to do it manually for each one. So I'm just going to make an edge loop there with my multi-cut. Just select my face. Just going to slightly scale that in. Just like that. So if I press 3 now, you can't really tell because it's not got the edge hardening on it yet. But I think for something like this, it's probably I think those are pretty straight as they come out. They just curve out. So let's in fact select these edges. And I don't want to change these edges because these are going to be perfectly symmetrical. So if I change my scale tool back to world, I can try and get more of this curve in now. I think that's probably pretty good. So I'm just going to delete the history on that. Freeze transforms in that. Just going to select all my faces. Deselect these ones here. Now if I go to my calculator, so we had 10 edges, didn't we? So we want to do 360, which is not hard to figure out. So we want to change that. So if we Control D that, Control D, rotate that round, 36. That should exactly match up. And you can do that manually for every single one, or we can go to Edit, Duplicate Special, select Box. Let's reset our tools to what that was in the Z. So we want to rotate the Z 36 degrees 9 times because we already have one. If we duplicate it, now that's pretty much duplicated absolutely perfectly. So now if we go Mesh, Combine, we can select all our vertices now and Edit Mesh and Merge. So now if we press 3, it's all merged together and we've got the beginnings of our sprocket. So in the other one we had this sort of hole, so we need to figure out how we're going to make the hole in there. So, because if we make a hole in the side of here for the screw, we will. So I'm actually going to bring both those references in. So it's going to go to orthographic front. Select camera, image plane, import image. I'm just going to bring both of them in, just so we all know what I'm talking about. Because sometimes you might have two bits of reference that you like, but you don't want to pick one, but you want bits. You want parts from one bit of reference, but you want bits from the other. So I want this I want at least a hole, so I can put a bolt in at least. So I'm just going to open that. And we're sort of building the same thing. I just prefer the sprocket on here. I just like the look of it. I don't really like the look of that. We're not even really going to see it. I just want the hole. So because we've made this sprocket, we also need to figure out how to completely make this round and also make this hole. So I'm just going to make another cylinder. Degrees. I'm going to select this and then select my cylinder. Go to rigging. I probably should make a custom tool, but let's just make it a point orient. It's just the quickest way for me to snap it to the middle. I can delete that. If I turn my wireframe on shaded on, I'm just going to scale this up. And I'm just going to go around and count the edges. 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, so it's 30 edges. Probably could have just figured that out by doubling it when I got halfway, but anyway. So we change it to 30. So we have to make a hole. We have to at least make a hole in a shape which has got 30 edges. So this could be quite challenging. I'm just going to pull this back. Go to my orthographic front. And I'm just going to arrange these edges before I do anything. Arrange these vertices. So I'm going to select my vertices, hold V. I'm just going to use the X and Y. If you select in the middle, that means it's going to snap to that exact point, but I don't want that. I just want to snap it in the X and Y. So I'm just going to go around. Make sure all these are snapped nicely in place. Just so that when we do continue with this, that when we extrude this out, it's going to be perfectly round. So the other method, this is just the easiest way I find to do it. And it guarantees you that you're not going to model something and it's turned out a bit. It's very easy to do. If it looks, you can sometimes look absolutely correct, but it will still be a little bit wobbly. So just going to meticulously go around and make sure they're all snapped in the correct space. Just make sure you're only doing it in the X and Y. Cool, so that's perfectly round. So we go to our perspective. One side's perfectly round, not the other. But we don't have to worry about that for now. In fact, let's just do both sides. In fact, Cool, so it shouldn't take too long. It's best just to make sure it's all done so you don't accidentally start working on stuff and it's not round, because then you have to start undoing stuff. Cool, so that's that done. Now what we can do, we can probably hide this for now. And select section, extrude that out. So now if we do smooth that, obviously we've not sharpened it, it's perfectly round. So now our next step is to try and get a hole. Or do we really? We probably don't really need a hole, to be honest. I'm just trying to think if we see it. We can stick a bolt in. Just trying to think if it's really worth putting a. Because we would have to make sure that it goes here and not in the round parts. Do I want to do that? I do want to do it, but we're definitely not going to see it. Sorry, I'm just thinking. Let's leave it. Let's not bother. We don't need it. We have got something funny going on down. Oh no, we haven't. So we'll just keep this simple. Control E, just so we finish off this sort of motor, because I know we've spent quite a long time on this already. So I'm just gonna yeah, let's leave it. So I'm just thinking, because I say I've not prepared any of this. I'm literally just doing it as I'm going. So I'm probably going to make some mistakes and something's going to go wrong. I try not to make mistakes, but cool. So I'm going to move this, and I probably assume that this goes that way around. We're quite small at the moment, so I think that's. I know I just randomly pulled that up and guessed the size, but that seems pretty reasonable. I think it goes that way. It makes sense to go that way because the other way just doesn't seem to make sense to me, so I think this is the correct way. So I am just going to select this, then that, then go to constrain and point, just to make sure that it's dead in the center. So I probably imagine that this I don't know, we can shorten it. We can make it whatever we want. We're still going close to the reference, but you don't necessarily have to make it absolutely perfect. But we're going to try. So if we Control E, scale it in. Ooh. So I'm just going to press 3 on that, so that's round. Just scale this in so it's roughly in. Probably have That didn't. So there's another bevel on that edge, so. Cool, so we're getting pretty close with what we want. So let's just Control E on that. And you can see I'm just modeling it to fit this sort of this part here. A lot of this stuff we're just not going to see, so don't worry a huge amount if it's can't see. So I'm just going to select that edge loop and just scale that out a bit. Cool. So I don't know, we can, I feel that probably makes more sense like that. And we can always move this who's to say that's probably a bit more sensible. And we can probably add a let's Control duplicate that. So if we don't need to make it, we can reuse stuff. And for something this small, you never it's such a small, tiniest sort of detail. We can get away with just duplicating something and just probably I think we might have to tidy this up. Okay, so just put that in there. I'm just going to scale that up to its a reasonable size. And I can actually just, I know I don't like doing that, but I can just scale it on one axis. And Control D. And do the same on that side. So let's just press 3 because that's right. In fact, before I do that, let's Control 1. Let's sort this out. So I'm going to select all these edges, and go bridge. I'm going to go around and just bevel all my edges now. I'm just going to bevel my sharp edges first. I'm going to bevel these softer edges. There is a sort of welded part here, so we can make that quite soft. And now we need to get all this in, so we can try some fencing. A bit there and a bit there. think if I just check that. So I kind of want that flat on top, to be honest. Because in our reference it is kind of tight on top. So if I just quickly make some edge loops around there. I'll do them around all of them. You want to do it as close as you can to this, like, so they're the same, but generally if they're not all the same, that doesn't matter too much. It adds just a little bit more variation to it, so don't worry if they're not all perfectly the same. Because we're not, there's a chance of actually seeing this in our final stuff is very slim, but if you want to use this for your modeling reels, you're going to want to show it off. So actually push that in a bit further, actually, to be honest. What have I done there? Oh, sure. Select all of them first. I'm really not keen on what that's doing, but I think it should be fine. Because don't forget, right, our shot that we're going to be using it in. So if we unhide our chainsword, the closest we're going to see of our actual thing is probably this close, and our motors are going to be all the way down here. So we must be putting a lot of detail down somewhere where we're not going to see, but this is just good modelling practice, I think. So cool. So let's hide that. And just want to look round. I've extruded that in so we can cover that up and around there. What's this part in here? Let's tidy all this up. So a lot of this stuff we're not going to see, so I'm not too bothered that this isn't looking amazing. I just want to make sure that we've got no light leaks or anything, or I don't want geo like this. I'm quite happy there to be a hole, because it just makes it easier for UVing and texturing. I'm going to hide that. I'm just going to pull this down so it's in there like that. I know it's not exactly what it is, but we can... and we're probably going to have some bolts on here where it's attached. So I just want to have a little look around, check we've got everything we could possibly need for this. We're going to do these at the end when we've positioned our motor. It looks like we actually haven't beveled any of this, so let's make sure we... Oh. Perfect. Just going to isolate that. going to go to my edges. And I'm just going to check around all my model and just make sure that everything's ready to go. So we've got that nice brass bevel there. So I select everything and press 3. I just want to look around and just double check. I'd actually rather that be a bit tighter. So I'm just going to select that, scale that in a bit, just so it's not affecting so much of the actual cog. Cool. So yeah, I think we're pretty, for the motor, we're pretty much done. We can, in fact, let's go to our front. Is it our front or is it our back? Yeah, no, it's our back. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to press 2. Well, sorry, 1. Just going to select these vertices, and I'm just going to pull this out so it matches. And we've got some not very nice geo here at the moment, so I don't mind it actually. I think it adds a bit of, it's not a perfect edge shape, which this is going to be spinning super fast anyway, so I think it adds a little bit of variation to it. So I think we're pretty much, let me just hide all of this and just do one last little check over and have a look. So we've done quite a lot of detail in here, which we probably won't see. A lot of this inside stuff we can probably leave. We don't really need to do it. Once we've put it all together and we see, we may change things, but for the bulk of the modelling I think we're pretty much done with the motor now and the sprocket. So I'm just going to select all of this. I'm just going to delete all the history off of it. So I'm just going to call this a motor sprocket. Put that under the motor. And I'm going to quickly find out the actual real size of this. So I'm just going to create a little cylinder, and I found a sort of scale of one of these abouts. I'm just going to use this as a rough scale. So I found 7.7 millimeters, and the diameter was approximately, well, the radius is 63, so let's go with 33.25. Cool. So we can see we're absolutely massive. So let's make sure we delete all that. I'm just gonna scale this down to a relatively correct-ish size. And even though we're gonna work at the correct size of this motor, it might just be too big. But it's worth, hopefully this should fit quite nicely in there. So I'm going to go something roughly like that. Actually, I don't need that anymore. So I'm just going to unhide my chainsword, and I'm just going to roughly place this now. So actually rotate this 180. So if we just set it up so it's powering this one, and you can definitely see we've got some different size sprockets here which we may have to adjust. So I think we actually scaled that one. So we're looking pretty big on the motor side. So I'm just going to scale this down slightly. We can do some smaller. Make this a bit smaller. Just going to use some orthographic top. Just going to roughly pull my motor back now, and I'm just going to I'm going to scale this down. It's obviously a bit too big. So I'm going to delete these edge loops and make this hole a little bit bigger. This is why always you want to kind of work in the correct scale, but if you can't, it's not such a big deal. You can always scale it in the end. Just going to hold shift and transform component. Shift. But actually, what I'll do, I'll just going to select this edge first and scale it out till it sort of fits. I'm just going to do the same with this one. It's worrying me, I can't see it. Okay, let's do that again. Things gone very wrong here. Alright. Why is that? Let's undo all that. I don't know what's gone on here. It seems to have... Do you know what? Just going to select all the faces. And then deselect that. Deselect that. Deselect that. And just delete all of that. Oh, no. Make sure you get all the stuff deselected before you delete it. You get selecting all sorts of stuff by accident. Oh, we got there in the end. So, just gonna get to my shaded X-ray. Just turn them off. Just gonna scale this out now. Like, we're always going to have to sort of adjust this to make it work. So don't worry about that. We're just doing our small refinements. And I'm not too bothered that this is because we're still going to adjust this, like we said a while back, when we finally get the chain going around it. We could even scale this up probably a tiny bit. Once we got the chain going around, it's going to power that, then that's going to power that. Should look pretty interesting. So I'm just going to finish up getting this sort of tidied up. Because here we've, I knew it would happen even though I checked. Make sure you don't delete any. Oh my god, what's going on here? Sorry about this. I seem to be making a bit of a mess. But, oh, I'm pretty sure I deselected all of that, but just make sure that you check that you've not deleted stuff that you don't want. Otherwise you'll end up like me. Control E. I'm just going to duplicate this in. Just make that beveled edge again. Then for some reason it doesn't like it when sometimes you do that. So undo that. Let's just double check I've not deleted anything by accident. Set those edges, these edges, bridge. Okay, so when that happens, you kind of need to give it some assistance because it's annoying. So if I bridge that, double click on that, deselect those edges. G, now that's bridged there. And we can bevel both these edges. So we want a fairly big bevel. Actually, before I do anything, I'm just going to double check that it's all, so I don't end up doing it again. Just going to pull these bolts in. So I'm just going to go to my orthographic top. And we're not going to see any of that bearing now. And obviously we need space for this as well, so we're going to have to move this, but let's bring that closer then. Bring that a bit further back. Cool, so I'll have it mounted on that side, another one mounted on the other side. Hopefully we'll build the mount here and it'll go onto that side. Cool, so I think we're pretty much done with the motor. So let's just select it all. Press 3. No, we're not done because I'm happy with that shape, but we actually need to bevel these edges. Just quickly select those edges there. Cool. Press 3. It's nicely beveled. And I think we're pretty much done. So our next step would be to build the bracket that's going to mount on here. Then once we've done that bracket, we can kind of see if we need to do any of these inside bits. For now, we're done with the motor. So if you've enjoyed this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this.